Okay, how are you? It's good to see everybody here. Looking very forward to jumping back into Bilvavi tonight. I know we took a break the last couple of weeks talking about the Torah of Shimon Spitzer, Bitachon and Amunah, but tonight we're going to jump back in to remind everybody where we left off. We left off around the Indian of Tamimus, simplicity. And we talked about the complexity of the world today, both in the physical, materialistic sense, in the spiritual sense, in the religious sense. And it almost feels like there's a sort of thickness, a density that's around our lives all the time. And it is a life that never seems to really stop, whether you're someone who's got, a lot of business that you have to get done, family commitments, tzarchei tzibur, learning, health, hobbies, you name it. Things take a tremendous amount of time. And I think what some of us go through is the idea that it's all very too much at times to handle and be able to do the things that we're supposed to do around our devekus and around our connecting to Hashem and around our ability to be mindful of life and our place in it and our connection to both our higher power and to our learning and to our ruchnias. And we feel like we get sucked into some of the gashmias ways of living, the chase, the rat race. And the craziest thing of it all is that everything that we're supposed to be doing is supposed to make it simpler. And yet it seems very fleeting in order to get there. So how is it that our connection to Hashem is supposed to be tamim, yet everything around that seems to be the opposite of? And so I know that for many guys around my age that are kind of about to turn a major corner at 40, or have already turned that corner at 40, but have spent the last 20 years grinding and hustling. Some have done exceptionally well, some have done average, some have done not as well financially, emotionally, religiously, spiritually. Many of us are measuring kind of where we're at to where we want to be consistently. And especially for the ones that may not have had the immediate financial success, there seems to be even more around that, wanting to find our place in the world and finding, kind of where we sit compared to others. The problem with it all is that we don't look at what we're doing as a simulation to getting to Olam Haba. We look at this as being the big show, that we're in it, this is it, this is all there is. And if we don't make it bigger today, then we're going to miss our window of opportunity. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. It's something that will take many people forever to figure out, that everything here is fleeting. Everything here that is a physical aspect can either be lifted up through spirituality, through Kedusha, through Panemius, through Dvekus, through Torah, or it won't be, and it'll give us some sort of peace and joy for a period of time. But man, are we surrounded today in a world where materialism is the draw, and there's so much of it. And for those that have been blessed with it in Klal Yisrael, the consistent recognition for that being their definition of who they are is everything in our communities. And I think that it's all set up in a way quite beautifully that if we can identify that as being the case and be able to separate from that in a way that allows us to connect to our Yiddishkeit, al pi tamimos, in a more simple, wholehearted, wholesome way, we have a tremendous opportunity to be able to connect to Hashem in a way that we never would have had we not had these challenges. And so when we left last time, we were actually talking about what it is when we talk in learning. And we talked about that when we actually talk to someone in learning, our entire mind and soul, even in learning, is immersed in the actual learning, but lacks tamimus. And it's like, what are you talking about? When we're we're steiging, when we're bechavrusa, when we're talking, when we're clearing over a Gemara, we're trying to figure out our learning, we're trying to debate back and forth. It turns into a situation where there's healthy debate, and I'm not saying there's not a place for that, nor is Bilvavi, but what he's saying is that when we're coming from a place of mind and not ruach and neshama, they have to work together, then we lose tamimus even in the sense of Talmud Torah. That even by not being connected to the Eibishter, which he doesn't mince words, every minute on the minute, getting to a place where we're fully connected, that's the only thing we're here for. Is the only thing a Shavisi Hashem Negdisam, that we're supposed to be connected to the Eibishter at all times. It's incredibly hard to do that, but let's not ignore the goal that's been laid out in front of us, which is how do we reach Dveikus? How do we reach Tamimus in order to get to Dveikus? Even in learning, we have to be present enough to be aware that if we do not connect Al-Pi the Neshama to the things that we're doing, we don't have the opportunity to uplift the Nitzaitzis, the sparks that are in everything that we have and everything that we have materialistic. We don't have an opportunity to be Dovuk B'Hashem, to have that Shavisi Hashem and Negdi Summit. And how many people struggle with this unconsciously, not because it's on purpose, of learning, but it becomes an intellectual exercise versus a connected exercise. There was a balabas that I was speaking to, and I showed him something, and I showed him this line, and I don't know what I was reading. I think it was Reb Shimon Spitzer actually on Shabbos, and it said, the entire avodah of learning Torah is to be able to connect deeper to the Eibishter. It can't be the avodah of itself. It's just like an intellectual exercise. And his response to me was, who says who? The Balabas really felt that the entire learning Torah is for Torah itself without any sort of deveikus needed. Tefillah, that's time to connect to Hashem, but the rest of it, it's not negeah. But that's obviously not the case, right? So today we're going to talk about how we can make this a bit more practical. How can we take tamimus, the midah of simplicity, and start to quiet the noise that goes on around us? And how are we able to tap in when there's so much happening? And how are we able to stay present with so much happening? And how are we able to make the main thing, but we really do it with some sense of consistency? So we'll jump in, bottom of page 66, Bilvavi part 4, and we're going to talk about understanding that Torah is only possible by connecting to the giver. Everything is only possible, al-pi tamimus, is by doing it through the connection with the Eibishter. How can we make this matter practical for us? As we said before, every word in the Torah is a part of Hashem. Hashem and the Torah are one. Just like Hashem is endless, so is his Torah endless. Thus, whenever one learns Torah, whether it is Chumash or Gemara, he's involved with Hashem, with the infinite, who cannot be comprehended. Not only is it impossible to have a complete understanding of anything in the Torah, but we never even begin to understand because it's impossible to understand Hashem's wisdom of the Torah from our human comprehension. How then can we ever hope to understand anything in the Torah? Only if we receive the understanding from Hashem. If a person is connected to Hashem and he is one with him, of him it can be applied. Hashem and the Jewish people are one, and from that attachment with Hashem, he will receive true understanding. So what's the proper attitude to have towards learning Torah? If we says that learning Torah can't be done just from the Meichin, it has to be done from some sort of panemius, tamimustic self, how do we show up for that? When we're kaveh itim la Torah as balabatim, when we carve out the few minutes that we have, an hour, 2 hours, 1 hour, 15 minutes, whatever we're holding, how do we make sure that we're doing that from a place of real deveikus? So we need tamimus in general, as well as when it comes to specific areas. So the general mahus of a ben Torah, the general mahus of a Eved Hashem, the general mahus of someone trying to live a life of panemius, is supposed to be coming from a place of tamimus. I think I've said it before in a shiur, but I've had a couple of friends call me out, and they said that it almost seems like I'm teaching myself the shiur because the energy that's being portrayed through the shiur is one of, I'm still not there yet. And I tell them that's 100% the truth. This entire chabura is based on the fact that I'm not anyone who should be giving it. I'm in a situation like everybody else where I'm trying to learn these concepts and apply them, and I definitely do try to apply them. But that's about as good as it gets. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lack of tamimus, there's a lack of okayness, there's a lack of inner peace that exists when someone is working on themselves. Ramosha Weinberger once said that, someone came over to two guys in shul. One guy was a serious guy, really working on himself, really trying to grow. And the other guy was the shul jokester. And the shul jokester would go over to the guy all the time. And I have a guy like this in my shul, so he's always talking during shul, he's walking around, he's jingling change in his pocket. He comes over to me or whoever else, and this is the example Moshe Weinberger gave, and how come you're not smiling? How come you're not happy? And Moshe Weinberger said, why is he not happy? He's very happy. He's very fulfilled. A guy who's working on himself is working on himself. When you're working on yourself, it's hard work. You can't always be smiling and jingling change in your pocket and making jokes and just being elate. You just can't. You're trying to fix things. You're trying to change behavior. You're trying to change programming that we've all been given from the world around us, from our parents. And not to say that any of it's bad, but most of the programming we've been given have not come from a super conscious place. It comes from a world of non-consciousness that's now starting to turn a corner, which is not for today's discussion, but we're living in a world of and being raised by many who are just not fully present, right? And so how can we expect to be? So that hard work of going from non-presence to presence is extremely difficult. Forget tamimos. It ends up being a situation that it almost is impossible to bear because you're trying so very hard to get to this place of peace, and you've been wired for everything else. Take a guy who's just been misbehaving for so many years, or a guy who's just been not doing what his neshama is here to do. He's doing what his physical guf is here to do. He's not doing what his neshama, and he tries to course correct that. It's constant battle, years of work, right? And it's a lifetime of work, but it's years of work for a guy like that wants to change his life around and wants to make changes and be a better person, whatever that may look like for that individual. So, even in Torah, we need tamimos. So this is what he's going to say. There are two different areas of comprehension in the Torah. One is called chachma, and the other is called kedusha, holiness and wisdom. Wisdom and holiness. Chachma is the intellectual matters, while kedusha are matters of abstinence. Kedusha, we think of kedusha with sexual purity. We think of kedusha of shmiras einayim. We think of kedusha with, how we show up in the world to keep our bodies pure, our minds pure, our eyes pure, our mouth pure. The Jewish people are called the holy nation, and thus we mainly have to connect to Hashem through kedusha. We mainly have to connect to Hashem through kedusha. When a person sits down to learn Torah, he also has to realize that there is kedusha here, not just chachma. It can't just be chachma. If a person learns with this awareness, the way he learns will be totally different. But the difference will come to play when he can't understand something. If he's only interested in chachma and not in kedusha, then when he can't understand something, he won't learn it. But when a person aims for kedusha as well, he will learn it even when he can't understand it. He learns whether he understands it or not. So I'm going to read that again. If he's only interested in chachma, and he's not interested in kedusha, and he can't understand something, then when he can't understand something, he won't learn it. But when a person aims for kedusha as well, he will learn it even when he can't understand it. He learns it whether he understands it or not. We do not mean to imply that we don't need to understand what we learn. We have a mitzvah to try to understand what we learn, but our main search has to be directed towards the kedusha of the Torah, not the chachma of the Torah. This is him. This is not, Panemius guy 101. This is Bilvavi Mishkan Evna. Therefore, one should think about this point for a long time and realize that as long as he is missing tamimos, his Torah learning will never amount to anything. One has to awaken his inner yearnings and to reach simple tamimos with Hashem. To work on gaining tamimos, one has to get used to learning parts of the Torah every day which he doesn't understand. The vard is that, and this is al pi chasidus also, and there's different camps on how they think of this, but does a person benefit from learning a piece of Gemara or a Mishnah or halacha, and he's learning it, let's say, in Hebrew, and his translation abilities aren't where they need to be, or they aren't, he's doing the best he can, but he doesn't fully understand it, but he's read the words, and he's tried to understand the shakal of Vitar, he's tried to go into the words, but eventually he just has to move on. Does he gain anything? Or no, is it just hefker? It's not, He doesn't retain anything. So there are many people who I've been told, because I go through this myself, where I'll learn a piece of Gemara and I could stay on the piece of Gemara probably for the next year and a half because it has math in it. For those who know me well, it's game over, right? But at the same time, I feel like just reading the words gets me some sort of devekus, right? It lets me show up to that. And there's almost a simplicity in that he's saying that just by showing up and being able to connect to the holy words of the Torah and knowing that behind those holy words, there's tremendous, tremendous Kedusha. And there's tremendous, tremendous like Ruach Hashem that we can connect with. Just by reading those words and being in that zone, that too is something that is very, very special. And so much of the learning ends up becoming university-like exercises where we forget the fact that it's got to be connecting to the neshama. Now, the mistake that gets made a lot of the time is that people will only want to learn the things that talk to their neshama. And that's very, very good, but it doesn't always sustain for the long term. Because anything in life, if we only do the things that we like, and we don't do the things that we need to, we know where we end with that. We have to do a lot of things we don't like. The same thing goes with Talmud Torah. For so many years, I just could not open a Mishnah Berurah because nothing bored me more than rules. Just, if I could learn some sort of spiritual teaching of Rav Yitzchak, if I could learn Chayvus Alavav Shar Bitachon, if I could learn Shemir Amunim, or if I could learn anything to do with like inner work, spirituality, Kedusha, like that's what I was doing, right? But it took one of my Rabbanim, but it took time for me to understand that it's important to know halacha, because you can't be a pneumistic yid if you don't know the halacha. It's important to understand shakal v'tari of a Gemara, because while it's hard, it teaches you how to think in a way that allows you to apply all the different things you're learning out pneumius in a way that you couldn't do without it. So it became a pneumius exercise. And for most cases, that a guy who doesn't have that in his life, it's hard to really stabilize yourself foundationally, right? There's a lot of back and forth in this discussion, not for today. The point I'm making is that when it comes to being able to connect to the learning that we're doing, and we're not coming from a place of kedusha, a nefesh, we're only coming from a place of meichen, we're only coming from a place of thinking and thought and intellectualism, we have a risk that we're not going to be connected to the devekus of the matter, which again, Shavisi Hashem L'Negdi Talmid in everything. And you would think, because it's unconscious, Shavisi takes a break and Talmud Torah then takes the place. It's one and the same. It always has to be, it's not even one and the same. It has to be feeding the main goal. The main thing is Shavisi Hashem L'Negdi Talmid. We can mainly work on this by getting used to saying Tehillim every day. Tehillim contains every Jew's soul, so all Jews connect to it. One should say each word of it happily. Even if you don't understand what you're saying, realize that you're dealing with holy words composed by one of the greatest people in history. My chavrusa, my extremely holy chavrusa, Rabbi Zev Garsik, he tells me all the time, just open a Zohar and look at the words. Open a Zohar and look at the words. Masuk Midvash Zohar. Open it up, look at the words. If you can open a Masuk Midvash, you can look at the words, you're going to get something from it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I'm not holding. I did buy it, so I have it, because I'd buy any sefer that makes me look like I'm, holding. But ultimately, it's something where that ends up being just that connection, right? At first, you won't be able to feel this. We must think to ourselves, however, that we can be involved, that to be involved with Torah only on an intellectual level is actually what distances one from Hashem, and that only Kedusha together with Chachma can bring a person close to Hashem. From that, a person will find that he can learn parts of the Torah that he doesn't understand or doesn't enjoy. You hear? So just like we can't approach it just from a Bina, we also can't just approach it from Chachma, we just also can't approach it from a Kedusha level either. We have to apply the Chachma to the Kedusha and the Kedusha to the Chachma. Sometimes a person is learning and he comes across a difficulty and it bothers him a lot that he doesn't understand. On one hand, this is commendable, but on the other hand, he has to also realize that it was Hashem who brought him to this situation that he doesn't understand. We forget. We're forgetful. We're forgetful that every breath, every next minute, every next experience in this simulation of Olam Haza, leading us to the big game, is simply that. It gets recreated faster than we can even recognize, and it's happening all on purpose. But we forget, because especially when we're in times of Talmud Torah, or in times of doing mitzvahs, quote unquote, we can do mitzvahs and not be davuk. We can learn Torah and not be davuk. And then I think for many guys, especially guys coming from similar camps of mine, which weren't in super yeshivish places, they were in high schools, they were in, went to Eretz Yisrael after high school, came back, is that they'll have the Talmud Torah message of, if you learn Torah, it's going to make you happy eventually. You just have to push through the pain. And for so long they weren't able to, because they needed to realize that you can learn the chachma of it, but you ultimately you're the kind of guy that needs the kedusha with it. But you have to have both, and hence the Pneumius HaTorah and the burst of Pneumius HaTorah that's existing in the world today. So for many, the message has always been, no, just kanak. But the kanakking has to, of course, happen. It's just the way to get there is different. And this is a big disagreement I have, in my own life with certain people that I very much respect and hold by. But it's got to be more of the chachma than it does the kedusha. The kedusha will come after the chachma, and that's the dilemma. It's not humanly possible to understand the Torah, and that we don't have to always understand everything. What did he say here? I'm sorry. On the other hand, one also has to realize that Hashem, who brought him to this situation that he doesn't understand, so that he will remember that it's not humanly possible to understand Torah, and that we don't have it to always understand everything. Concerning Moshe Rabbeinu, it was Moshe is true and his Torah is true. Moshe was called the servant of Hashem, and a servant doesn't ask questions about his master and what he tells him to do. So did Moshe act like a true servant, never questioning Hashem? If Hashem wants you to understand, then you will understand it. If not, you won't. Again, Shavisi. We cannot have any comprehension of Torah on our own. We are required to search for the understanding. However, because this is our mitzvah of learning Torah, that is our mitzvah of learning Torah. But our soul, our neshama, must not be concerned if we understand it or not. On a deep note, it's really gaiva if a person is upset that he doesn't understand something. Wow. This is a very subtle point, because in the end, we still have to toil in Torah and try to understand it. Yet, at the same time, our desire to understand must come from lishma, because we want to give pleasure to Hashem, and the desire to understand should not be coming from a personal desire to understand. What a high level. The entire lishma conversation is one that keeps me, well, I wish. It doesn't keep me up at night. But it's such a high level. I mean, all of this panemius and chasidus and inner spiritual avodah for so many people gives them cheshek, gives them fulfillment, gives them, fills gaps in them to make us feel better. I'd be lying. I mean, I'm glad it gives some sort of nachas ruach to Hashem, but ultimately it's because I'm not good without it. I tried life without it, and it didn't go great. And now life with it makes it go better. So I'm okay. And as long as I'm okay, then things are okay. But to live life of lishma, where you're okay, but that's not the main thing. Of course, we're not supposed to be suffering and only making Hashem okay. We're supposed to have both. But at the highest level, we're so okay because Hashem is so okay. We're not okay and, now I can serve Hashem. And that is the avodah most of us, I think, are going through. Let me get myself okay, so I'm okay, in order to make Hashem okay. Which is holding. I'm not saying it's not. But imagine a world where I'm okay because Hashem's okay. That's it. That's all I need. If Hashem's okay and I'm doing the right thing for Hashem, He doesn't need our mitzvahs. But He wants our mitzvahs. He wants our connection. Many people who learn Torah are bothered and pained at the fact that they don't learn enough. They think for that reason for this reason they aren't becoming gedolim. We cannot say that this is incorrect, but many times people aren't growing in their ruchnius simply for a different reason, because a person is missing the panemius which the gedolim lived with. When a person lives a superficial kind of life and he isn't really connected to Hashem, his Torah learning isn't either connected to Hashem. It is not only how much we learn that brings us closer to Hashem. The main thing is that we are feeling as we learn. A person has to feel that when he is learning, he is involving himself with the Torah of the Rebbeinu Shalom. One is not learning the words of Abaye and Rava. It is godly wisdom. It is not humanly possible to understand their words. We are supposed to learn Torah to give nachas ruach to our Creator and not out of personal desire for knowledge. If a person is learning and all he's concerned about is his understanding of it, his learning will not bring him to the desired goal. Before a person sits down to learn, he should gather his thoughts together and talk to Hashem. Ribbonu Shalom. I'm learning because you commanded me to. If you would command me not to learn, I wouldn't learn, just like on Tisha B'Av when we don't learn. I'm sitting and learning to give you nachas ruach. Even in what I do understand, I'm still missing the true understanding that I haven't yet reached the inner depth of the matter. When a person encounters a difficulty in Gemara and he's trying to understand it, he should first know that it was Hashem who brought him to the situation, that he doesn't understand everything, which is such a relief, especially for guys like me that are below average naturally at learning and have to really work and knock at it. I'm not knocking myself. It's just the truth. I don't have the mind of some of my closest friends that are able to learn at that level. And some of my friends who are able to learn at that level don't even learn that much, which is the biggest killer because they're so good at it. After this, he should daven to Hashem, Ribono Shel Olam, if you want that I remain with this difficulty and not understand it, I'm prepared to remain that way. But if your will is that I should understand, please grant me Chachma Bina and Das so that I can understand your words of Torah. When you daven to Hashem like this, it has come from a feeling that you're willing to give up everything and become totally humbled by Hashem. Each person should search inside of himself and see if he's prepared to remain an ignoramus who cannot learn, if that is what Hashem would will from him. It's hard to reach this point, but we must try to draw close to it, live with the feeling that we are willing to remain a simple bore, if Hashem would ever will so. This is a lengthy topic, and one chapter alone doesn't encompass the entire matter. We've only mentioned here the roots of the discussion. We'll try with help of Hashem to expand on these words, if Hashem allows us to. Wow. The point he's making is an extreme point. It's this ability to recognize that in times of Kedusha, in times of Torah, in times of doing the right thing, we still probably aren't always showing up the way we need to. Kal v'chomer in situations that, aren't. That probably doesn't work like Kal v'chomer. It's probably the opposite. The point I'm making is that we're in a situation where I think, besides being distracted beyond imagination, and besides the fact that we're chasing our tail that usually has $1 at the end of it, or the fact that we can't settle our minds in present reality of what we're dealing with and learning with and connecting with, that even in the most important Torah-dic moments of our lives, we still are responsible of showing up and being davak to Hashem. And that one doesn't ever get rid of the other. And in situations in the real world, of course, and in situations of learning Torah, also, of course. You can learn Torah without Hashem. It happens. Guys burn out. Guys feel like they just can't connect to it because they've been told the message of just learn. You don't need to enjoy it. It'll grow on you. There's this whole missing inner world piece, being able to do it through that lens, being able to connect to it, understanding that without doing it with Hashem, it's not geschmack, but with doing it with Hashem, it can be very geschmack. Anyways, hope this was helpful. I look forward to speaking to you guys next week, Amir Hashem.